Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of V Next. I am your host, Mike Walker, and you are listening to episode 29. And today we're going to be talking to Doug McCollough, and he's the CIO of the City of Dublin. It's going to be a really cool conversation because we're going to talk about the innovations that are happening inside this city that is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. And some of you may already know that Columbus, Ohio won the Paul Allen grant for being the number one smart city proposal. And so we'll talk to Doug about his interactions with that smart city initiative, what it means for his city, all the great things that he's doing. And I think you're really going to like this conversation because he is such one, just a great guy, super smart guy. But two, he's very, very active in the technology community. So he provides some really, really good insights that I think all of you will enjoy. And so, like always, all the show notes and some additional material will be on vnextpod.com. Again, that's vnextpod.com. So definitely check that out because, again, oftentimes we go straight to the podcast or the video, but we miss out on a lot of the rich content that we produce in addition to that. And maybe you want some links to go to some extended information or other videos or podcasts that Doug has been on. And so definitely check that out. Also, make sure that you rate, you subscribe, you like, whatever mechanism for whatever way across the interwebs in which you're seeing or hearing this. Uh, Definitely do that. It shows some support that, yes, this is something that is of interest, but also if you've got feedback, provide feedback in the comments or again on the website as well. So, without any further ado, uh, let's get into it. Hey, Doug, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you here. Um, so Doug, we're going to talk about smart cities, right?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, let's maybe help folks understand. I could give folks the overview of who you are. You've got quite the background, but I'm going to do a disservice. How about you give us an idea of who you are, what your role is as CIO of the City of Dublin? Maybe give us kind of an overview of who you are.
Okay. So, as a background, first of all, I'm a technology guy. Uh, I have some background in telecommunications and enough variety that I managed to rise to the ranks of management. So, I do a little software, I do a little hardware and network administration and security. I'm not an expert in any of those areas, but I've done a little bit, and I'm kind of a people manager and a project manager. I did manage to get into state government. I've worked for four state of Ohio agencies, which gave me kind of some broad experience not only on how states work, but how technology in the public sector works. State government is a really amazing opportunity to learn some of that. It's just a different kind of institution. I did get the opportunity to work in a municipality. My first one was Richmond, Virginia. And from Richmond, Virginia, I came to Dublin, Ohio. And municipalities is another level, another layer of an incredible experience when it comes to applying technology to problems. So I do encourage my technology professional friends that if you're the type of person who really wants to fix the Rubik's cube, you want to solve problems, cities are really a great environment to do it. Because you're going to work on a small team and you dig into some issues there. Um, I work in the city of Dublin as their first chief information officer,
Oh,
which
wow.
was an opportunity for a very small community to, kind of look forward, be more future oriented, look into a lot of technologies, and be really a futurist. So I don't do the operational technology here. I I really think about what would make this community successful in terms of digital tools and kind of looking at things. And if you look at some other aspects of my background, uh, they become non technical pretty quick. For example, workforce and technical skills and some economic development. And so success is not just technology, but integrating with technology is difficult. And you need people who have a broad outlook. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do and how I do it, because of all of that background. So there's a short version.
So, how did you get to this point? So, what led you to this role of CIO for the city of Dublin? What were some of the key milestones for you on your journey here?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a CIO. Years ago, let's say 10 years ago, it was considered, the top of the food chain in terms of a technology leadership and management. The role has changed a lot. But, I was fortunate to start my technology career as a project manager. And if you've not done project management, then you may not know that it is one of the best ways of learning everything about an enterprise, its goals, and how the technology actually works. I worked at Lucent Technologies at the time. So I learned telecommunications and software development, product development, just was amazing education. But also in project management, learning how to work with people, how to influence people into getting a project across the line. And that gave me a lot of the momentum towards people management. And I became a manager, a supervisor, and I walked up the line from there, a network manager, which is not necessarily the management of a network. It's management of a team of people who do email administration and server virtualization, cybersecurity. And I have learned from my teams along the way, and I've been fortunate there. I do have a MBA, executive MBA program at University of Notre Dame, and that gave me some business knowledge. So I'm a bit of a unicorn in that I have technology, I have government, and I have business. And so the roles of CIO and C suite roles have been ones that's been easier for me to step into because of some of those experiences.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a unique skill set, a unique background and perspective. A lot of CIOs either aspire to that point or they're already there, but organizationally it's not accepted. And they have to take on some of the heavier weight operational type of stuff. But it sounds like you're less of a chief information officer. You're more of a chief innovation officer. Would that be right?
Yeah, on some days I'm a chief technology officer. Some days I'm a chief innovation officer. Um, what I've begun to appreciate is this begins to come down to strategy and communications and vision. You certainly need to know a lot about policy, and you need to know how a machine works, and that machine is not always a computer. That machine may be a city, it may be a program of some sort. And so you're right. I'm going to say being a CIO of a city in an era of smart cities uh, blows up the concept of what is a CIO. Very different from a enterprise that is a manufacturer or a service provision kind of a thing. In terms of smart city, I need to know about economic development. I need to be an advocate for broadband expansion. And sometimes people look at all of what I talk about and do, and they say, "How does all that fit into something?" Well, it doesn't always neatly fit into something, but it all needs to get done. So.
So given, you've got this business background, and, you've got this unique dynamic in a city environment where you've got elected officials and all that, what's your interaction with, you know, the city council, deputy mayor? Is it something that you collaborate with them often, around, innovation?
I do. I would say that think about a C-suite relationship with a board, right? I mean, you see them, you don't necessarily get managed by them on a day-to-day basis, but you're very aware of their priorities. You may speak before them or present before them, but you don't have day-to-day conversations. That's how a city council is. We are a city manager-led form of government here. But for folks who are not as aware of how a local government kind of works, um, that interaction is a bit less. I mean, we do some retreats and some workshops and those kinds of things, but I do get to interact with citizens a lot more than I did even in state government. So the feedback loop and even the media cycle is much more rapid. And I really enjoy that about this. So a day in the life involves a lot of interaction and feedback from citizens and the needs of council without a direct necessarily conversation with them, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And the city of Dublin, folks may not be familiar with it. It's a smaller city, but they may be familiar with the city of Columbus, Ohio. And
Mhm.
so Columbus, Ohio actually won the Paul Allen Award for smart cities. And they're creating a nationwide playbook for smart cities. Given that you're a nearby neighborhood city, what's your relationship with the smart city initiatives in Columbus?
Well, there are certain advantages to being in a community of this size, which some people, some of my friends and colleagues who are in bigger markets may not be aware of. So it's easy to look at Columbus, Ohio, and say, oh, it's small, but that means that everybody knows each other. And so businesses know each other, we collaborate well with each other, we form teams well. And so Columbus has benefited from a number of different kinds of awards types. One of them is that Paul Allen Award. There's the Smart Cities Challenge. Uh, there is the Intelligent Community, Most Intelligent Community of the Year. They had that designation in 2015. Um, and it is Columbus, Ohio, and the city of Columbus, but we all support that. I'll give you another initiative that maybe we'll talk about later. The 33 Smart Mobility Corridor has to do with connected and autonomous vehicles. It's not specific to the city of Columbus, but we have all kind of interacted and attempted to form an innovative community so that we can compete, frankly, against other communities. And so, interaction with it, I sat on a couple of working groups for Smart Columbus, which is the eventual brand that came out of that. I worked on the data management plan and data privacy plan, a couple of amazing documents that I encourage your listeners to check out because they really are part of a national standard. They're part of a benchmark that I think they are really award-winning documents for how to do this. And we certainly designed and developed those looking at what other communities had done. Tampa's doing amazing work. Pittsburgh does amazing work. Kansas City. So this is an ongoing development that happens. But to answer your original question, those are all my friends. I sit on some work groups with them, and I advise and communicate with them frequently. And Dublin is a pretty important part of the greater Columbus ecosystem, especially around technology and smart cities. So we interact on that level.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you brought up some of those publications, because what I've been surprised about is a lot of this material that's being created within the city of Columbus. They're opening up. I mean, it's available for anybody to view and download. It's actually some really good material.
Yeah, I would say if you're a technologist and you work in the realm of crowdsourcing software, or you're interested in open data initiatives and those kinds of things, a lot of the smart city stuff is for you. You're gonna love it. It's open, it's visible. You can contribute to it. You can fork and grab some of these projects. They adhere to open source and crowdsourcing principles and concepts, so I encourage technologists to pay attention to these things because I think you'll be pleased with how cities view the future of kind of public access technology.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when they think of public sector, they think of stodgy, they think of, boring. But, what I've found, at least, and why I was excited to talk to you, Doug, was if you want really good examples of where things like digital twins are used, technologies like blockchain is used, AI, AR, VR, etc., IoT especially, there's no better place to see it in action than in a smart city type of environment. So I was really excited to talk to you about it because I mean, there's just a lot going on, and it's real. It's not a lab thing, and it's got to be hardened in production grade because we're talking about citizens and citizens paying for it, but also their safety.
That's absolutely right. And you think about the concepts of resilience, high availability. Um, and I'm telling you, if you're a security person or an advocate around a number of different technological priorities, uh, cities, municipalities are a place to dig into, and you can explore things and you can contribute to them. I find it exciting. I would say in our field, in technology, there are a lot of people who begin to question, well, I write code or I do this, but I'm not sure what impact my work has. That's a wonderful, interesting thing about cities that allows people to see that impact and connect the dots, really. Because our technological environment is so complex at this point that I think it's difficult for people to say, what does it all mean? But we can place you at an intersection and show you data measuring traffic counts and how decisions get made from that. That's what it all means. How can people be safer, have a better quality of life, quality of space? Um, and that's fulfilling. I want people to know, we don't just write the code and ship the product. We get to see it in action.
Right. Yeah. And you got to live with what you build, right?
Yeah.
And, for the elected side of the house, I mean, there's real consequences, over the next few years if things go south. So, some real skin in the game, as they say.
Absolutely.
So, before we move on too deep into smart cities, I want to talk about another aspect of what you're doing that I think is really, really cool. And you alluded to it earlier. You said, a part of your role that you really enjoy is the connection with people and with community. And Columbus is, the surrounding area is a fairly tight knit group of people. And so you're involved in a number of community activities. Uh, Maybe talk a little bit about, some of the things that you're involved with.
Well, sure. Technology as an industry is benefits from having some amazing career opportunities. Uh, Generally, technologists have high salaries. They enjoy a really great quality of life. Also, in the industry, there's a desperate gap in finding qualified people to fulfill many of the roles. And I think people in other industries might be shocked by that, to hear that there are jobs over here and a very high demand for those jobs, such that salaries go up. You can build a life on this. I have a problem with the concept that there are people who are looking for jobs right next door to people who are looking for people. What's wrong with that picture? And so a while ago, I feel like leaders in the technology industry have to fix that. It's not just the people who hire people, and it's not just the students who are trying to learn the skills to get the job. We are responsible for that. We have an industry that works great in a lot of ways, but in other ways it's broken. And so that becomes a workforce development concept. It becomes technologists. What is holding people back from being successful in that field? And I have interacted with or directly supported a number of initiatives that begin to answer those questions. I will include in that the diversity and inclusion questions that have to do with the entire pipeline of talent. That includes women in technology, that includes LGBTQ plus, that includes people of color, underrepresented communities, and how are we managing those resources? I am a co-founder of an organization called Black Tech Columbus, which really collects a lot of the African American technology professionals and opens up conversations with all of these groups as and the companies that hire them as to what are we doing wrong. And I just want to throw one other thing out here, and that's the startup community as well. So it's not always your large businesses or your small to medium sized businesses, but also just startups. It's an extremely important part of our community. If it lacks diversity, or if it lacks talent, or if it lacks funding, it's not going to work. And so, is that something that a technology C suite person is supposed to deal with? Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of the machine. And the people part of the machine, if it's not working right, then the metal part of the machine isn't going to work right. It doesn't matter how great our autonomous vehicles, our cloud services, our cybersecurity, if we don't get the people thing right, then the rest of it really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I really love what you're doing, especially on the diversity side, because I had this conversation. I think it was yesterday with a client, and it's, part of it is, the diversity of what you can see, but a lot of this is diversity of thought. It's, you want these people's perspectives. They're different. That's fine. That's great. We want that perspective. And especially, from a city perspective, it's, you've got a city of all walks of life. And, making sure that the technology solutions that we build are inclusive and are optimized. I mean, let's not even talk about inclusive. That should be by default. But, to really maximize the things that are important to either a cultural group or a set of preferences or what have you, or even providing opportunities, like you said, providing platforms for people to be successful. I think, that is really, really essential, critical. I can't find, any more adjectives that I would, I could throw a whole bunch of adjectives here to describe that. But, especially now with, not only the uh, uh, social and behavioral crisis that we're in right now, but also the geopolitical aspects around nationalism. And then you layer on top of that a health crisis, and it's the perfect storm. And so, I really applaud you for, one, going outside and proactively facilitating, because it's not just, like you said, it's not just the African American community, but it's the Jewish community, it's the,
Right.
LGBTQ plus community, it's all these different communities. So, definitely major kudos to you, Doug, on really being a champion for people. That's what it
Yeah.
turns into. It's for, humans that share, 99.9% of all of our DNA, a champion for all of us. So, I really applaud you on that.
I appreciate that. And I do want to say that some of that awareness comes from working in a city because every day you get up and you want to solve that community's problems. And those problems are not all, we have a hardened network. We have good security, and sometimes it's going to break and you got to upgrade it and everything. But that's not your problem area. Your problem area is you need to diversify your economy as well. If I could just throw one other thing in here, I think you're in Ohio as well. Um, when you don't have a diverse economy, which includes startups and healthy businesses that are thriving and innovating, we have examples like we've had in Lordstown, Ohio, where a very big automaker closes or a steel mill closes, and that community is devastated with more than 60% of their jobs in that environment. Um, Local economies have to work to prevent that. We need diversity so that we are not devastated by economic changes, or I would say even environmental changes. So we're in a moment of awareness with social unrest, and then we have a health crisis and we have an economic crisis, but we have to keep our eye on the environmental and sustainability things there too. So with this new awareness that we have, an extraordinary opportunity to connect and coordinate a lot of our things. To me, smart city is a big part of that. You have data, you have groups and people and coordination and cooperation. So um, I hope that everyone can draw clear, bright lines between care and interest over diversity and people issues with sustainability, resilience, good health, good environment. That's what we're really talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we don't have breathable air and, good water to drink, the other stuff, becomes less important, right?
Right.
If we can't breathe the air that we're in.
Yep.
So the last thing that I'll ask you, Doug, here before we move on, because, I think this is an important topic. Um, I guess for, the communities in which you're working with, these working groups around diversity, what do you think has been some of your kind of lessons learned going through that process that you would like to share with people? Some of your kind of your ahas as you were going through working with them. Either it was, oh wow, I didn't realize this or that, or maybe it was, oh, if I only would have done this, then I would have been more successful.
Yeah, it's funny. Some of the things that I've learned in working and really taught. First of all, I didn't know that I was working in that, and I had someone say, Doug, I really appreciate your work in this area, and I said, I'm a CIO of City of Dublin. I don't work in that area. I'm not a diversity and inclusion champion. They said, well, you might want to check your social media. Yes, you are. You are actually doing that. one of the things that I've learned is that this stuff is really hard. On the one hand, it's really easy because it's like identify the communities, communicate, coordinate, and we can make big, important things happen. But on the other hand, it's really difficult because scholarships arrive and job opportunities and advancement opportunities and conversations. And it's hard to find the talent and connect to the universities and have the conversations. It is a lot of work. And so it's exhausting, quite frankly. And so that is a lessons learned. I wish and hope that we all do it and we don't leave it to champions. This is all of our priority and all of our necessity. But I'd also say another lesson learned is that the opportunities are out there. There's an enormous amount of opportunities. When we had our first conference with Black Tech Columbus, our theme was "We're here." Because the concept was that I can't find them, they won't apply for my jobs, and amongst Black technologists, the concept had been I don't see these jobs, I don't see the opportunities, and so we have to say we're here. Let's just take a breath, raise our hand, and say this is how you get in touch with us, and that has helped a lot. So breaking things down to their most simplistic aspects, taking the heat out of the room and bringing more light, and having a victimless and crimeless conversation about doing good things and good work, it just advances us. And we do this for Columbus as well. I think we should do it all over the country and all over the world. But we are having a conversation in Columbus specifically about being just an absolutely fantastic community. Everybody in Columbus loves being in Columbus. And we're doing this for Columbus. We want to, at the end of the day, be better off for it. And that spirit gets everybody to the table. So good things are happening.
Awesome, kudos, man. That's the great stuff. I love to hear it. I'm originally from Cincinnati, so I'm an Ohioan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really great to see these sorts of activities really thrive. And there's other communities in other cities. Right now I'm in a suburb of Cleveland. We've got similar things, but sounds like you've got something really good going on. So let's transition into smart cities. And like you said before, about the awareness component. A lot of people say these words. They say smart city, but they've got a specific idea of what it means to them. I guess for you, since you're in the space, you're in a lot of ways accountable for building this. How do you define what is a smart city, but also maybe equally important to what it is? Also, what would you say isn't a smart city?
Yeah, so I don't have notes in front of me right now and everything, and I talk about this a bit, so I'm freestyling here. But I would say that when people ask me this question, I would say that uh, a smart city has to do with your outcomes and goals. You want to use smart in order to achieve something. If you have technology in place that's not in particular going in any direction, and it doesn't have a direction that it's going in, you're just layering on technology, that's not smart. The smart part of smart city is more along the what and why, and the city part is very, very important. And I think that oftentimes a city employee is going to think about a city as that city's administration and that government. That's not the city. And a resident is going to think of a city as their experience with it. And a business that locates there has a completely different thing. So there are gray lines in between. How do you define city? First of all, not trying to give you a real long answer, but I just want to throw that out there because first you got to define what do you mean city. But generally, I define a smart city as having to do with if I had to build one from scratch, or I walked in somewhere and they said, we're a city, we want to become a smart city. I say, well, you start with your foundational infrastructure, which in our world really means broadband. It means network and communications technologies and a base layer of technology. And you add sensors and cameras and data gathering devices, which could be sort of some IoT. You, with the data that those things throw off, you do analysis and you make decisions and you gain insights, and then you use those insights to make decisions, which could be policy decisions or new laws or when do you close the streets. And you measure all of that to determine, have we increased and improved the quality of life, safety, measurable things that impact human beings' lives and their families and their businesses and their experiences. That to me is a smart city.
Okay, so I'm going to practice my active listening skills here on the fly. So let's see how I do. Maybe you can grade me here, Doug. What I think I heard you say, and I agree with all of it, is a smart city is a initiative that is deliberately coordinated. A strategy is built to understand what is the purpose, what sort of outcomes are we trying to drive for our city and for our citizens, which includes components around access to technology, uh, good user experiences with technology, but ultimately, for this to be a smart city, there needs to be a level of automation or intelligence that is ingrained in the core fabric of the city. And so once you define, hey, what do we want to be when we grow up? And you define, some key objectives of the city and what, the citizens, where they want to go and how they want to be protected or enabled, etc. Then it's about, well, how do we take it to the next level, and how do we make this much more productive city, intelligent city, etc. Am I close to what you're meaning here?
You're very close, and all of that is true. I would just adapt one part of what you said, and that is kind of user experiences with the technology. And what we actually desire is that the technology becomes invisible, and it's a person's experience with their city. It's with their community. It's their experience when they're out walking. Um, if you can use technology and data and analytics to improve that experience so that they don't really interact with technology. That's what we picture in the future. The technology is invisible. They want to interact with another person and with a complaint they have or a service they'd like to access. They don't want to interact with the technology. And so our task is to create an invisible layer of sensors and interfaces with humans so that they can reduce their traffic congestion and find a parking spot and uh, get access to services and information for their recreation center and get access to the pool. And we want them to be able to do that like that. That's smart, for someone to be able to program and automate their experience and feel comfortable that their data is private and if they have questions, their questions get answered. They don't get answered through an app. They just get answered. That's the future that's the smart that I think we need to get to.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, when I was at Gartner, one of the technology trends that I identified as, over the next 5 to 10 years was, exactly what you just said, which was, the whole goal here is to have transparently immersive experiences.
Right.
And so, that was kind of a fully loaded term, meaning that, this technology should be invisible. We shouldn't have to know that there's these sensors in the walls or there's cameras here and there, but they should serve a very meaningful purpose for us. Maybe it's on our behalf. Maybe we interact with it through a way that human beings are more comfortable with. But with the immersive, it's also creating these instead of surfacey type of experiences that are more two-dimensional, but actually creating these immersive experiences as well, where we can, at times where we do want to immerse ourselves in technology. Let's say we walk by in a very minority report oriented way. There's a sensor, on a shop front piece of glass, and I've got augmented reality contact lenses on. And when I walk by, that IoT sensor knows who I am, all my preferences, and then visualized through my contact lenses, I see the advertisement or the thing that I would be interested in, etc. And so that component from an immersive perspective, I think that there's a healthy balance of, again, making technology approachable.
Yeah.
And then
Uh,
third, it's all about experiences. I mean, that's, us as human beings, that's our goal. What we strive for is have meaningful experiences. And throughout history, technology has helped facilitate meaningful experiences as well.
Yeah, we need to understand those experiences, and that comes back to that human component where what does a family actually want? What is a person who wants to feel safe? What is the experience they're going for? What is a visitor to the community who wants to enjoy the sights and the restaurants and the entertainment? What are they trying to do? Um, if you don't understand that, you can't craft that experience, and you can't use technology to aid and automate that experience. So it is very important, and it's one of the reasons why I feel, and I encourage others as they define smart city, that you get into a kind of a persona exercise and a journey exercise of that experience. Because it's interesting, you talked about this kind of minority report experience where you're kind of interacting with a business on a consumer level. Um, but the experiences that people will want to have is they're not going to want to leave a system and enter into another system when they leave community and government and go into consumer and entertainment and restaurant and bar. They're going to want it to be seamless. And one of the questions that I sometimes ask is which side of that, who's the best placed to create a robust, safe, auditable, transparent environment where those technologies can layer. I believe personally that local governments and cities are the best place to do that because there's a lot of trust with those institutions. We don't often want to, give information or experiences over to corporations because I can't ask that corporation for things. Lately, yes, there's new laws and policies that say I can audit you. I want you to give me all of my data and things like that, but you've got a lot more influence and power with your local government. And so we'd love to build the infrastructure that allows you to pass through different experiences and have a seamless experience because you're here in Dublin. But also when you walk on that border of Dublin and you cross from Dublin into Columbus, you also need to have a seamless experience. And so we're in a position to build those, and businesses are in a position to participate and coordinate. And that's the work, I think, of smart city development.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and we could definitely talk about this for hours and hours, and maybe we should consider kind of decomposing some of these topics for specific times to talk. But some of the key nuggets that I think that I want to highlight for folks is one is how individuals, whether those personas that you'd mentioned, whether I'm a visitor to a city or I'm a citizen of that particular city or a neighboring city, or my risk tolerance level is higher or lower than other people, everyone's different. And the hard part about a lot of this is the contextualization of those experiences. And when we talk about creating meaningful and immersive experiences, it's we need to understand what's important to that person, right? Is the first thing on that person's mind fear and safety, or is it adventure? I know whenever I go to a new city, I don't necessarily jump to how safe it is. Now I use some common sense. I don't just walk into a neighborhood or what have you. But I'll go to the concierge and say, "Hey, I'm in San Francisco. Give me a map. I'll put it in my back pocket. Point me in a direction where I can find some stuff, and I'm just going to start walking. I'm going to pop into a local pub, have a beer, talk to some of the locals, and I'm going to mosey on down the road." And that's kind of how I like to explore a city. But other people are not like that.
Yeah.
Namely, my wife is not like that. So I only do that on business travel.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we're both alluding to here is data is paramount. The AI component of this is paramount as well. And so for you, we talked about all the things that a smart city is and the benefits that it's bringing. What do you think are the vital cookbook technology ingredients? So is there kind of a standard punch list of technologies that you think are absolutely vital to enabling a smart city?
That's a great question. There are a few, and they may seem to a bunch of technology professionals as well, duh, but it's not well, duh to a lot of people. You know, smart cities is not going to be built just by technology professionals, and so we need to state these things. One of them is really your data and analytics layer. That's a tough nut to crack.
Oh yeah.
Um, you can gather data through a lot of sensors and IoT devices over a really great network. But if you don't really have a data strategy and an analytics strategy, that's the thing. The tools, the the machine learning models, those exist, and you can go out and work with a partner or whatever, and you can build it. But if you don't really have a strategy around that, then you're in trouble. So you need a layer. And I say a layer as opposed to a repository or some particular technology, however that gets done. Your data and analytics layer. I do think that machine learning is going to be a critical punch list item of that. Um, the City of Dublin has a digital identity project. It's very experimental. But in terms of an individual's personal identity, I do think that that's a critical component of some of the smart city development. You can't build personas. You can't uh, really address what you just described. I want to go to a city. I'm going to do this kind of a thing. That's my character. That's the experience I want to have with this city. If you are an anonymous blob, that does not have characteristics, we cannot program experiences for you. Some people with that safety component may want to give up some information about their location because they want a little extra insurance with the local police department. Those are the kinds of things that you need identity for. I'm also going to say asset identification, whether it be fire hydrants or roads or vehicles or trees or whatever, physical objects and need to have that identification layer. Those are a few of the things that I think are critical. I've mentioned the IoT. You need things.
Yep.
You need just an ocean full of sensors and devices. And that is extremely challenging because of the implications that they have. So I will also throw in here, and I realize I'm mixing a bunch of stuff in my bucket, but you didn't tell me what I couldn't put
That's
in there.
right.
I will mention policy. And so policy and communication about that policy, you might as well stop the train right now if you don't have the capacity to really develop an amazing policy thing. We've taken some criticism in Smart Columbus about the amount of time and work we put into the data privacy plan and the data management plan, but that background work is essential to being able to build the rest of the structure. And like and everybody listening knows, building a technology structure is actually not that difficult.
Right.
We know how to design it. We've known since the 50s and 60s how to build an amazing infrastructure. The policy work and the privacy concerns and communicating about that, that's on the punch list.
So a couple things that I didn't hear, and I would love to get your perspective on this. One is I'll just create a broad category: autonomous things. So whether that be vehicles, whether that be aerial drones, rover drones, an autonomous thing could also be a device that does something on our behalf. That is, I don't know, some device somewhere. Um, so I think about those components. I think about when you mention e-citizen ID or digital identity. I think of where does technologies like blockchain have a role? Um, and lastly, I think that we've got these devices. Where's my demo device? Here we go, right here. We've got one of these, a computer in our pocket. You know, uh, the strategy for how to maximize things that the city might not own, and it's about leveraging the technologies that the consumer has, that because everyone at the end of the day is a citizen or a consumer. So leveraging those technologies that may be already in the environment and having more of kind of a coordination strategy. What do you think about some of those elements of a smart city strategy?
Absolutely. I think I would broaden away from autonomous things and I would say automation. because then that can be applied to a process and to information and to things. So in terms of principles that I think need to be included in the circle of items, I would include automation, but then I'm going to include agency or the ability to program and deploy agents on your own behalf so that my agents are acting for me. They are anonymous. They're going to collect the information and the resources and things that I want, but they're not going to reveal things about me I don't want revealed. And so, autonomy or automation, agents, and then some concepts that come out of the blockchain or distributed ledger world, distributed technologies. So you're going to have more edge computing. If you don't take data and transfer it halfway across the country to a centralized cloud center, then you have some opportunities where privacy is concerned. So the more edge computing you can do in an area that this interaction is that data is not going to leave, that's a critical component here. Um, and after that, I would include um, where blockchain is concerned, trustlessness. Um, the ability for me and another entity, or my agent and an entity's agent, to interact with each other with no trust. That's a blockchain concept. And it's one of the reasons why our digital identity concept does use distributed ledger. It's auditable, and it's just a technology concept that I think you need if you're going to build an entire city stack of technologies. So trustlessness, automation, agency, um, those are the key technical concepts that have to be at the table. I didn't mention them at first necessarily because you could probably build a smart city without some of that stuff. Like you don't have to use blockchain. It doesn't have to be distributed. If you have a centralized technology model, you could build the technology. But I do believe that ultimately we will not use these, right? Whatever the next device is, it's probably going to be wearable. It's going to be ambient, so I can speak into the world or type into the world, and my wishes will be granted because of the services that I have employed and how they work together based on my agents.
Yeah, and let's double click on that a little bit. So how pervasive do you think these smart city technologies will be? So will they be kind of more surfacey, or will they be ingrained in our daily lives?
I do think that with permission models, that many of these things are going to manifest on devices that individuals own, and that they are going to be able to interact with accounts and repositories and identities that they own. And so cities will not have those. They will get permission to access them or to deliver through them. And so when we talk about how much this will permeate our daily lives, I think that's very likely. I think that people are uneasy about the camera that's on the corner that's watching them or monitoring their eyeballs or things like that. I think we'll still have cameras and sensors and monitors that are on walls and on kiosks and those kinds of things. Devices that are at intersections monitoring traffic and those kinds of things. But it's the human machine interface inside that vehicle that I think is going to where the most bang for the buck is, and that's owned by that individual. And so they have more control over when it's on or off, and those kinds of things. So there might be greater comfort levels. So anyway, that's an opinion.
No, no, I think you're right. And to continue along that thread, um, technology influences our behavior, right? It's giving us new data and new insights that we didn't have before. And so you can already see how just, with the wave of current events with, police officers having body cameras, right? How that has impacted in a very material way, not only officer behavior, but also citizen behavior as well. The fact that I can record, anywhere at any time. I got a camera anywhere, and upload something for the world to see. Um, how do you think, and this is more of an open-ended question, but how do you think this technology is going to change behaviors in cities, both positively and negatively? Let's look at both sides.
Yeah. It's interesting because of the pandemic lately, we have a lot more mask wearing, and that changes the ability to identify people. You will be aware that there are technologies that can analyze gaits, the way people walk, and things like that. And public cameras are valuable to a lot of different business processes. But I do think if we didn't have the pandemic, we were going to have people start wearing masks anyway and not wanting to participate in facial recognition. So I do think that I hope actually that we will have a greater democratization of people being concerned and interested in how data is collected in the public and how can I opt out. And I'm hoping that one of the things we haven't talked about yet, that people's participation in the democratic process and making their voice heard um, is also something that we will see in terms of a change in behavior. I've spoken about this. I did a TEDx talk saying your data is your voice, in which I really am making the argument that we need to close the digital divide because uh, we're going to have a democratization of data. And the change in behavior could be that people raise their voice a lot more and participate in the democratic process differently than just electing a person. And I think that's an interaction with a community that's a behavior change there. Um, People are going to figure out how to opt out of being recorded.
Now, Doug, you're not you when you say data is your voice, you're not talking about Twitter,
No,
right?
not that kind of data as your voice. Right. But, one of my concerns in going back to diversity and everything, I belong to a community, that being the African American community, that has a level of distrust of government and of technology. That's going to be a problem in a smart city. I would throw in there many immigrant communities and a lot of different communities that just don't trust that. And so some communities opt out. I don't want to be identified. I don't want these kinds of things. And perhaps they should. I mean, it's wise to be skeptical. Um, what does that mean when services, healthcare services, voting, transportation begin to be shifted into biometric recognition? We need to develop technologies that inspire trust because a lot of people are going to opt out, and the digital divide is going to continue to grow. A lot of people who develop technologies don't have to worry about that. I need to worry about that because we're building a better city here. And if we leave out vast amounts of populations because we did not include a safe way to opt out, right? You don't want your face recognized because you'd like some privacy. But if you go missing, if you get kidnapped
Yeah.
or something like that, you want your face recognized. So how do we contextually, as you said, build systems that allow people to monitor and moderate their own behavior in ways that they can be successful? Not just we, the government, are successful, but they are able to get the outcomes that they are seeking.
Yeah, and Doug, this podcast isn't about necessarily blockchain. We've been talking a lot about blockchain here recently. There's just a wave of activity, but for this topic, what the qualities of blockchain that I really love for this particular piece of the problem is the level of transparency that blockchain can expose into a community. And so being able to say, okay, yes, I can see that you're recording this data and maybe even more importantly, how you're using this data. I can see events happening and I've got a level of transparency which equals accountability. So some of the behavioral things that have happened as a result of, you take, 20 years ago with London, the most, closed caption TV cameras in the world, that has influenced behavior because they know, well, someone's watching me. I better kind of think about what I'm doing. Um, but likewise, it's true with like an example with all the recordings of all the incidents with police officers and body cameras, etc. Is it's influenced behavior because not because of the technology was there, but because of the ubiquitousness of the technology, the transparency of the technology that anybody can see. And if we look in our corporate environments, anytime you go to a business stakeholder and you say, hey, here's a decision, we could talk about this, you and we can do the gentleman's agreement, or you could actually sign this piece of paper. they're going to take that signing of that piece of paper much, much more seriously because it's on record now and other
Right.
people can see it and audit it and hold them accountable. And so what I really like about blockchain as one of these components of a smart city is it is providing, to your point around, you know, conspiracy, let's just say generically, conspiracy theory folks or folks that have been disenfranchised or folks coming from a different country where the government abused the rights of citizens, whatever the case may be. This provides a level of trust and transparency where they can go, okay, I might not completely trust this government because, it is what it is. However, I can at least see when actors are doing bad things.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And if you look at the pattern of social development and kind of history that we have been in for a while now, a lack of trust, which is healthy, um, is going to continue. And not being able to determine what is true and what is not true is a real problem for a civil society. The concept of fake news and deep fake and even watching video and I can't determine whether I'm watching the truth. We're not going to be able to organize a community around that.
Yep.
So I like blockchain. There's a lot not to like about it, but I like it in that I know this one thing is true. I got 5 fingers right here. I know that. If I can put that on a blockchain and you can't change it, then I don't have to worry about that one. And I got 5 fingers on this hand too. And I'm going to start recording my truths. I know I own this house. I know what day it is. I know this is my car. I know how fast I was going. All of these sensors and measures and things can grab something that I can control. I don't have to depend upon my government. If my government comes to me and says, you know what, the other night you were in this location and you were driving this fast and all of this, I can say, oh, let's go to the immutable record
Yeah.
and let's use that as something as opposed to eyewitnesses or those kinds of things. So where video was in helping to change our behavior, I think that we need to take that video and the truth or the facts that it records and use things like blockchain. I just think it's inevitable. We don't have to like it. We may think it's silly and that it's whatever on the hype cycle. Get used to it. It's a great technology that can, when deployed wisely, can make a big difference in people's lives, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if if you talk to, I won't name names, but you talk to general analyst firms, they definitely like to throw a little shade at the blockchain world, and I think part of it is they're not necessarily exposed to a lot of the things that I think you and I have been exposed to on how and where these blockchain technologies have been applied and the real successes behind it. Because the reality is whether it's for competitive differentiation, where I don't want to tell people what I'm doing because they'll do this, my competitors will do the same thing and be just as efficient as I am. Two, it's baked in. So there was a local city government in the Middle East that I was working with, and you know they're using blockchain to identify assets, across their entire city, from street lights to fire hydrants. Very similar to what you were talking about earlier. They've done that a year and a half, 2 years ago, right?
Right.
And they're on to the next big thing using this technology. And so, people have to take, kind of what the analyst community and the media say about these technologies, and really go out and talk to people who are actually doing real stuff and not cryptocurrency and all that stuff. I'm not a
Right.
huge fan of that. But the practical applications of this is super, super powerful. When we talk about things like just simple things that's been so hard for us, like master data management.
Right.
How many projects have you been on with master data management that have just either suck the life out of you,
Mm-hmm.
because you got to build these complex hierarchies, and it's a huge science experiment, to eventually no one wanting to use it and it being a constant uphill battle, and ultimately it doesn't succeed. Blockchain has a lot of great qualities that remove a lot of that kind of archaic thinking around how to master data. Now, we've been kind of talking on the edges around kind of disruption in your mind for a smart city. Um, what do you think are going to be some of the big disruptors that are going to throw a wrench in some of the things that you guys are doing? Is there any one or two technologies that you think that is really going to be highly disruptive? Either about it and it's going to be disruptive, and you're actively building plans around it, or you have kind of a theory. An example would be people are worried about quantum and breaking encryption. Uh, type algorithms. Where do you stand on major technology disruptions in smart cities?
I might have a slightly different take on that, and you will get me into a lot of trouble. So I really hope that only technology professionals are watching this and not any of my government friends. But I've been dubious about the future of government. It has to be disrupted, not unlike bookstores. If you thought that Amazon was not going to disrupt retail 15 years ago, you're hurting now. Who are we to think that this is not going to disrupt local government? So I'm not at quantum yet, and I do believe that quantum development goes hand in hand. As soon as you break it, you're going to build something else. That's an arms race, and that keeps going. I will say a couple of things. One, uh, I think blockchain or something like it is going to replace voting. It's very reliable and it's going to take a long
Oh, I
time to
hope so.
happen.
I hope so.
I
And
mean, you just voting is done. We've lost confidence in it, and it's just this is a data problem. It just kills people who are data people who are like, wait a second, come on, it's data.
Doug,
The,
I'm going to get on a slight little soapbox here. Doug, my friend here. So I can initiate a multiple hundreds of $1,000 wire transfer on this device
yeah,
anywhere on
right,
the planet. Why can't I vote on this?
absolutely,
Why can't I? I mean, it's silly. It's so silly. And I think you're right. I mean, I think blockchain, whether it's taking an existing mode and making it much much more trustworthy, and taking the guesswork out of it, taking all the political stuff out of it,
yeah,
and getting down to what people really care about and how people want their governments to run, or it's creating a new model. I don't know what that answer is. I
yeah,
kind of have an idea of what it is on what I think it is on the banking side with money. I don't think we're going to move to cryptocurrency. I think we're just going to create digital dollars, because at the end of the day, when bad things go wrong, the government comes in and protects people. You don't
right,
get that with Bitcoin and all that stuff. You're pretty much on your own. And so it comes down to the lowest common denominator of incentive. And I think that's the case going to be with voting as well. It's uh, we're not too far off, I would imagine, if things go a little hairy with this next election, where there's going to be some significant reform happening, which
yeah.
I think is needed.
There may not be a straight line to blockchain, but as you say, it's silly, and it's so silly as to be inevitable. It's just inevitable. It's just, we are now having an argument about mail in ballots. I mean, really? It's 2020. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, when you are able to make public decisions that people can do over a device, you then don't have to wait every 2 years to vote. You don't have to wait every 4 years. And so, a democratization, when you talk about disruption, what I see as a government is that the democratization of decision making can be pushed down, can be made more frequent. Policy development and all sorts of things can be much more programmable and automatable. And and the pushing out of information that way as well. I will put another disruptive technology that I believe in, and that is augmented reality and augmentation generally. But the ability to overlay on the physical world information that can help me make decisions, I think is important. I think another disruption is on technology itself, because artificial intelligence begins to remove our need to design a great technology.
Right.
What we need to do is capture assets and their state and measure things. And then we need to build artificial intelligence models to do the program. We don't need to build software to do everything. So we're going to leap into new capabilities that are going to affect cities, local governments, and state governments because of asset tagging, identification of people, states, uh, uh, context, these and distribution of systems. When these things come together and you apply an artificial intelligence model to them and you display them with augmented reality, it's going to change our tech industry, I believe, as well as our government. The way that we police, the way that we deliver physical services are all going to be disrupted.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it can't come soon enough. It's we live in an exciting time, and I wonder about the time that we're in, if it's going to be like the turn of the 20th century, where either it probably won't be my kids, it'll probably be my grandkids, where my grandkids come to me and go, "Grandpa, you drove a car?
Right.
You did, this or that or whatever," where they're just perplexed, or like, how could you even think about that? I mean, even in some ways, we can look back at our ages and go, we had landlines and didn't have cell phones, and we had beepers, and it's like we actually had to coordinate with people and meet them places. What the heck is that all
Yeah.
about? And so
We had landlines with 5 numbers. You could memorize Pennsylvania 6500, whatever.
right.
You didn't even have to memorize the whole number. Yeah.
So yeah, I think an exciting time, and we're on the cusp of something really, really, really exciting as technologists, right? Um, so practically speaking, so we've talked broadly about what are smart cities, what are some key disruptions and market drivers and technologies that are fueling smart cities. Let's transition a little bit into some of the things that you're doing for the city of Dublin. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things around smart city projects that you're doing right now at the city of Dublin?
Well, one of them I've spoken about is our digital identity project, and some of them are rather, if you can use the word traditional for smart cities, traditional. So I would include smart parking in that. Smart mobility, this is the word that we use to kind of catch all for connected and autonomous vehicles, but then also services that use data to deliver a mobility service to someone. We're experimenting with a number of different devices. We are deploying our first chatbot. We have some speaker based skills that allow people to ask the city for some things and get some information back. Dublin News in 90 is one of those. We have worked with some social services agencies on getting speaker devices to elderly people. And we have a very interesting project called Forever Dublin that deploys speakers into people's homes that do medication reminders and deal with loneliness and some of those social kinds of things. And I think I also mentioned our 33 Smart Mobility Corridor, which is a Council of Governments based project with the city of Marysville, the city of Dublin, and Union County. And then you throw the state of Ohio in there with Drive Ohio and a number of other partners, including Transportation Research Center, which is a very large connected vehicle experiment and playground where many of these things come up. So we're kind of going big on connected vehicles. We have a lot of equipment in the city with devices and broadcasts and those kinds of things. We are a broadband community, so we're doing a lot of things there. I'm very fascinated with our experiment when it comes to smart parking because we're using video analytics. You may have seen this done in a lot of different places, but we're doing it as an experiment so we can see what can you use video analytics for? What can you do with them? And then finally, our city council has established a visionary goal of becoming the most connected city in the nation, and they are talking about broadband and broadband connectivity for all of our residents and businesses. So that's a big, hairy goal. And it's fascinating because I get to work in a place where we're really talking about connectivity and devices and smart cities and those things. But I don't put us too far ahead of other smart city programs. We are part of a community of cities
Right.
that are all experimenting about this. And Dublin doesn't have to do everything. Somebody else could experiment and do the lessons learned. And we share our lessons learned with others, but you don't want to do everything yourself, right? We're
Right.
co-developing this stuff.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the connectivity piece, are you guys, laying down a bunch of fiber? Or are you guys just going directly to say, hey, all 5G, baby? Kind of what's the strategy, or is it a dual strategy?
Well, that's on the table, and we would like to leverage. We have a 125-mile fiber network that goes around Columbus. It goes outside of Dublin. We should be leveraging that and seeing what would it take to connect fiber or other broadband technologies, which could be wireless, to every home in the city. That's no small item. Others have tried.
Right.
See Google. Um, it's no easy thing to do. So we are all of the above strategy. We are doing proofs of concept to say, could we connect fiber to homes and run a utility? There's a lot of political and economic implications to that. So our city council has asked me to evaluate that and come back with recommendations. And so that's on the table. You could create a utility. You could also work with the existing utilities to say, we're at about 75% coverage in the city. What would it take for us to be at 100%? And
Right.
there's a lot of barriers to that, but maybe with some money and some fiber trading, you could get there. So the answer isn't definitely this, but the answer is we'll try everything and anything in order to reach that visionary goal.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Now, a couple things I didn't hear you talk about, and I'm curious about, is digital twins.
Yeah,
Any work in the digital twin space to kind of create that digital representation of the city?
that's a good question. I love the concept of digital twins, and I want to do it right now, right?
Right, right,
But one of the things that I have recognized is that if a city or any entity does not have the components that would make digital twinning possible, what are you doing with it, right? So to me, that means you need the devices and the asset inventory. You need the data management layer that we've talked about,
hmm
and you need the artificial intelligence or machine learning layer. And then you build a digital twin. Now, there are those who will come to you today and say, no, we can do a twin of one of your institutions. We can do a twin of your parking lot or of your police department or something like that. That's fine. But I believe that digital twin is going to be an analytical tool moving forward into the future. And it's going to require your data layer and your device layer and your connectivity layer and your analytics layer. Why not do those things first?
right.
And again, back to my original definition of a smart city, if I put a technology in because I think it's cool, but it doesn't result in an outcome that we targeted and said we want to reach this outcome, then I shouldn't do it. And with a digital twin, I think the outcome, the advantage or the opportunity is to be able to gain insights and to do experiments on a data set. We don't have to do that today. So I'll wait. I'd love to do it. We'll do it soon, but let's build the rest of the infrastructure out first.
Yeah, I think that's extremely practical advice, and I'm glad that you said that and didn't say, "Well, we're just jumping all in,"
Yeah.
because I've definitely seen even a smaller scale with smart buildings, people fall into the same trap, and at the end of the day, it comes down to um, the not only the kind of the contextual data, but also the taxonomy and ontology of, what are all the different things that are in the environment and how do they relate to each other, and what are we allowed to do, what are we not allowed to do, and all that. There's so much that we just don't even really know right now
Right.
to go and do this. It's, we got to get that data layer in place before we can, really create something that's meaningful and useful. The other thing that would be interesting to understand is from a sustainability perspective. Are there any initiatives that your group is leading around kind of green IT sustainability?
Not related to technology specifically, but related to the city. So we have a sustainability group, a work group, and I contribute to it and give ideas around that. Again, like what I've said about other smart city things, we're interested in sustainability outside of technology. Let's use technology to support and develop around that. So, one of the things that I think is attractive is an incentive model. And I'm going to keep on going back to digital identity because our digital identity program includes points, a blockchain based points system that you can then put people in competition with each other or businesses. So we have this many buildings. What if they were retrofitted with energy saving printers or business office equipment
Love it.
or
Gamify it.
retrofitted? Yeah, gamify it because you've got points.
Yep.
Um, so to me, developing a point system is a step towards an incentives program
Yep.
that could include sustainability goals. Once again, every technology that you apply should go back to a stated goal, a known goal. We have sustainability goals as a city. So if we want to change our energy costs or eliminate waste or get more vehicles off of the road or encourage more electric vehicles, um, those are goals that we should state, and then we should develop a way of grabbing data from those who can impact those goals and providing incentives to them. So I can measure your performance. I can say, hey, you did this thing. Here are some economic development incentives or some swag or whatever we want to deliver. I don't know that that's the best way of applying technology to sustainability environmental goals, but you can apply them to yourself as well. So we have a long way to go on those, but we are definitely focused on them.
So, in our last few minutes together, so we got 3 or 4 minutes left together, and what I'd like to ask you is, we've covered a lot of ground today, and we wanted to cover even more ground. But what would be a few things that you'd want to leave people with that they really need to think about from our conversation together?
Something that we haven't said so much, but I have encouraged the other leaders within the city organization, and I would for any organization, start to pull apart technology, remove the magic, and stop putting the digital innovation tasks into your technology group. Not that they can't handle it or they don't want to do all the cool projects, but let's cut that out. Let's all be digital and let's make finance and HR and police and recreation and parks and leadership all digital. Let's all start to use these concepts because they're not specific to technology. So something I would like to leave people with is I this will be controversial. Part of the CIO's job is to destroy your job. Let's no longer need a CIO, a central, a chief information officer, because everyone is doing information and innovation. That's our job. So that's what I'd like to leave people with.
Yeah, Doug, I think maybe this is why we get along so well. We think a lot alike, and I've said similar things for years now. Um, this whole notion of IT and the business. You hear that pervasive in technologists when they speak about their business partners. They talk about this abstracted magical being called quote unquote the business,
Hmm.
and I think that's done
Or IT for
or
that matter.
IT. And I think
Right.
that's done our industry an incredible disservice because at the end of the day, there's no business on this planet that can survive without some sort of technology.
Right.
And that's likewise when we apply that to the topic of digital. We are being thrusted into the digital era. And for us to say there's this group of people with robes on that chant and do magical things with technology and make it a dark art rather than, hey, we all have a fiduciary responsibility or a responsibility to citizens, whatever it may be. But we all have this shared responsibility to understand, appreciate, but also design for both the technology being a tool in our toolbox that we leverage in the most meaningful business way.
Yeah. If I could soapbox for just one moment as
Yep.
well, shame on us in technology also for doing that. When the business, quote unquote, starts to direct and design their own solutions, which we enabled, and we yank them back. And we say, no, 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 you don't understand cybersecurity or you don't understand data. So we'll step in and take care of this. Shame on us. Let's empower and enable them and fade back. And that becomes an enabled digital enterprise. And that's our job. It is not to serve them, it's to help them serve themselves.
Totally. Totally agree. So Doug, it's been a great conversation. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I tweet a lot. So Twitter at Doug IT Pro. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Those are good things. Perhaps my email will be in the show notes, and some people can connect with me that way. Um, you'll find me active on those social media kind of channels. I find them to be a great way of interacting.
Perfect. Well, listen, Doug. Like I said, it's been a great conversation. I, can't thank you enough for coming on. And hopefully you'll come on again.
Thank you. It has been a blast. I enjoy this.